Chapter 4: Communal Influence and the Chain Reaction. To fully connect the individual with the global system is imperative to understand and restructure group perception, interaction, influence, and dependence. For this reason, this chapter will be structured first on proximity of different groups towards individuals, then it will distinguish governing groups from corporative groups, and finally will present a different group dynamic that can be implemented in order to solve some issues that might be the source of the many of the actual structural deficits. For first, it is necessary to understand that individuals do not come into this world without being already a part of at least one group, which is humanity. This is, for a lack of a better notion, the bubble that encompasses every single individual, independently of family, location, or culture. For this reason, this should be presented and treated as the fundamental global human community. However, thanks to its vastness, it can become difficult for an individual to influence and create information that is useful towards such a big group. And if it's taken in consideration the current system in place, it can be even harder if it's presented the high grade of competition and even some corruption that can be deteriorating the exposition of new knowledge from within. But getting back to the line, most of the times individuals are born inside some predefined groups, such as families, tribes, and local communities. These groups are formed due to direct proximity, being these blood related, or simply due to kin bonds. Also, it's likely that the individuals are a part of cultural located groups. Such examples are municipalities, countries, religious groups, political groups, sports collectives, associations, and others. And even though the individual can opt out or in from many of these during a length of one's life, because these are introduced in such an early stages of people's lives, is important to understand the impact that these make early on. For this reason, it is essential that these are well organized and well defined, being its organization and definition an important part of individuals' education from the beginning. Because of this, early social education should have a strong focus on helping individuals to understand how to create connections amongst each other, preferably in a non-invasive way. To reach a higher level of understanding on how this should happen, is fundamental that school systems be free of bias, and to ensure it, it's fundamental to adopt the TOK system, the tree of knowledge, in such a way that individuals are the fundamental piece in growing their own knowledge from early ages of education. Just a parenthesis. However, is understandable the assistance and supervision of parents and educators if it's still necessary. The first line of group building and definition should be directly connected with how to and whom to share knowledge, being this a way of connecting the knowledge built by an individual and the process of sharing which can be translated into wisdom. Wisdom, after being shared, can be evaluated according to its usefulness for the groups it's being shared. This creates an expansion of the group's knowledge, which can be identified on the amount of bits of information brought to the group. And independently of the structure, bubble, pyramid, or ring shape, or other, it's possible to visualize and account for that growth. By doing so, it can be translated directly on the individual influence capability, which directly identifies one as a source of a specific growth of a group. This growth at the same time can be seen and understood by other groups, which, by acknowledging the value and usefulness of such growth, also might be interested in having a similar development. However, depending on the substance of the information, there are various parameters that will make the information spread further or not, being the specificity of such information or being strongly connected to the individual impact of the source. Just two examples. Ultimately, however, the greatest goal is to spread information that is useful for everybody in such a way it becomes global wisdom, being beneficial to all the people and helping other individuals access more knowledge. This growth in the group's knowledge can be translated directly in inherent value brought by the individuals inside it. However, it is impossible to restrict that wisdom only to the group, and this creates the expected chain reaction that can be manifested in other groups adjacent and in direct contact with the group that experienced that development, if these groups find it useful. The transmission of wisdom can then be from the individual to the groups that the one defines of being a part of, and from those groups towards other groups that are in direct relation with them. Furthermore, and since there are groups that encapsulate others and have a broader audience, it is possible that the influence of that wisdom can come indirectly from other defined groups that are not directly connected to those and that are getting it directly mainly thanks to the perceived usefulness of the wisdom that was shared and the need for it at the time. Another interesting point regards the transmission of wisdom is that the groups are defined and set by the individuals, mainly thanks to their perceived notions of borders. However, in reality, these are not completely set, and this allows many others to achieve the wisdom and share it according to the notion of usefulness. In a way, the individual has the freedom to expose some wisdom, but it's up to the others to identify the ways that the wisdom can be implemented and used. It's easy to understand that the BET system can be implemented not only at the governing level of a state but also at the corporative level. If we take in consideration the education system and the group dynamics, for starters, to implement a reformation of the education system is of most importance that the governments decide to have the interest of the public in consideration, and for that matter, be willing to follow and instigate in their societies the needs of their own people. And to do so is of most importance to identify their people as the most valuable resource. And in doing so, invest the future of the development in creating individuals that are more intelligent, creative, and with capacity of critical thinking by themselves. And once this happens, it's imperative to provide the tools that allow individuals to better organize and sustain themselves according to one's interests and motivations. After this, it's necessary to direct their effort in improving not only them but others. And finally, it is of the most importance to guarantee the best ways to ensure the best group decision making at all levels or dimensions of society. For this reason, governments play a vital role towards the implementation of the bit economy theory system. However, this can only be achieved by having the capacity to allow individuals to be more free, and that can only happen if they are willing to lose and dilute their power and ultimately be careless of their own interests and instead shift towards the real interests of their populations. Despite of it, it is possible to implement some of these concepts today, to shift towards an economic economy based on the value of the populations, considering the production of information, it's necessary a reformation of the governments and specifically on the democratic system this and the electoral system. This notion goes accordingly to how democracy has been presented and with the development of technology, which brought much global progress. However, and since the democratic institutions are overall systems, have been implemented way before the changes brought by new technologies, it's difficult to let go of old habits in favor of a better and experimented system. Although there is the possibility to rethink old systems and develop newer tools to improve democracy, and by doing so, develop the concept of democracy itself. To start, it's possible to implement a newer election system electoral system, specifically with the use of internet and the blockchain technology. This step by itself will improve group-based decisions and ultimately allow for a better approach on referendums, and even allowing governments to have a stronger sense of the population's interests moving forward. Furthermore, by implementing a different school system is possible to achieve a better and more reality-funded information to a more critically capable population, allowing governments to ask more difficult questions and to receive more coherent responses that allows for a better solutions altogether. Finally, it allows for more freedom for local groups to ensure and define their specific goals, allowing them to reach out for the information that most suits them, which in turn ensures more productivity and likely more strength in their connections, both inside between individuals and outside between other local groups. Another factor to take in consideration is the possibility to reshape representation in a more dynamic and constructive manner, in such a way that allows the groups to allocate the different representators accordingly to different expertise in order to guarantee a more fact-based opinion based on their own interests. Also, in the same topic, it's possible to better connect with other groups and individuals that can bring external solutions that may strengthen their group development and further clarify their stance on different subjects. By implementing some of these measures and by allowing more freedom not only of choice but also of thought, it's possible to approximate closely to the ideals of democracy, and by achieving a better understanding of democracy and how groups make decisions, it's possible to align common objectives from different communities and groups, which can in turn allow for a global based decisions of importance that can impact human beings globally in ways that benefit all humanity. One of the current system group gaps relates with the notion of cooperative competition dynamic, which lacks consistency when regarding that education is produced substantially in a social ecosystem, which does not translate into the necessities of an evidently ever more polarizing current global economy, which have came to produce a handful of major corporations that monopolize between themselves multiple slashes of the market, creating an oligarchy with which no public, social, or governing institutions can compete because of both the reach out of the free-based localization and the egotistic sovereignty perspective of nations. The monopolization is in fact one of the direct consequences of it, and it translates into less creativity and less opportunities for the general public to have a voice. and to further any cause that it can serve both the individual or the organization that one would might be interested in helping or simply support. For this reason, it's fundamental to rethink the human value for corporations as well. So, how could uh, corporations transition towards BT system happen? Despite of all corporations are in themselves monumental structures that produce something, being these both service or goods, and what they produce can be translated into information. This information is basically their new revenue. This revenue can then be used to further their development and pay their employers. So far, it's much similar to how corporations work today. However, there are two main differences. The first regards the valuation of the corporation, and the second regards the responsibility and accountability towards social and environmental sustainability. In the BET system, the value of corporations would work in one of these two ways. The first way can be exemplified by how groups' value is measured and explained previously, but it's simply the value of a corporation would be connected with all the individuals that are a part of it. And the value would grow accordingly with the total output of the individuals that are a part of it. This kind of valuation is more suited towards service providing structures. However, it is possible to implement it in a products production group that would prefer to have a decentralized structure, which has seen a rise recently if we account the many corporations and plant manufacturers that are unionizing and opting for a fair organizational structure. The other way to value a corporation in the BET system is to following the current norm of structural organization to assign a specific value to the time of a specific worker. However, this, contrary to the current system, needs to release information not only for the accounting purpose but also regarding individual performances in such a way that would be direct value of the employer's performances. So just to summarize it, the corporations would identify the employers as a fundamental part of the corporation and add their information towards their group growth, or they would add information to each individual that is willing to give them time. By understanding this, it's possible to start to see how social sustainability could be reached. However, this focuses mostly on the specific individual roles inside of a corporation, and to tackle major global issues is necessary to extrapolate it towards the global perspective. So, because the value of every single human becomes the core business of every institution, organization, or corporation, also the global values of this start to shift from the creation of value through wealth accumulation and in the form of money, but essentially through the creation of value in the individuals for the humanity's necessities. Furthermore, there is a freedom specificity that is more clear, which is the opportunity for individuals to choose multiple ways to self-enrich and the freedom to tackle multiple issues and not only the goals of a specific corporation. By choosing to help specific projects, assisting on a production or servicing of a corporation during a time frame, or just supporting with knowledge or experience, or even just independently work for oneself or a specific group of people that would might be interested in one's own effort. Lastly, there is the necessity to reframe and rebuild the value of researches, investigations, development, and scientific knowledge overall. Today, the way scientific knowledge is being handled by the economic system creates an unfair advantage to both the consumer and the scientists in such a way that it no longer aims towards the necessities being needing solutions or objectives that can further humanity, but instead there is this gloom of profitability that shadows the purpose of development. For instance, it is unprofitable to come up with a single shot cure for a specific disease, because once that is solved, the need for it decreases, and in doing so, the profitability that can come from it. Another issue that is disrupting development is the competition that scientists are exposed to, or the famous publish or perish dilemma. Normally, scientists are known to have a different understanding of time, mostly because their researches are dependent of different timelines, schedules that are settled not by them, but mostly by the topic of their studies. However, market dependence pressure development to fit economic necessities, which can ultimately be an external factor that can disrupt the validity of results if we take into consideration that many things can have more than a lifetime of research, like the climate, for instance. It's insensible and even malicious to force results or to condemn a scientist to a lifetime of struggle. So, lastly, I'm going to present just a new way to form a structure, a group structure. So we are known for having pyramidal shaped structures. We are known for having bubble shaped structures. But one of my recent projects is to try to make you see the possibility of a donut shaped structure. And what is this donut shaped structure and why am I talking about it? So the idea is that the donut has a layer outside, and this layer outside of the donut is continuously rotating. And every time that it is out is in fact learning from the outside. And every time that it is the inside circle, it means that is producing for the inside. Meanwhile, the dough, the inside of the donut, it's in fact everyone that is really stringed and wants really and believes strongly in the group. But because they are so focused on the group, it's a little bit difficult for them to step out of the bubble. And for that reason, it's also a little bit difficult for them to lead them as a group because they are very good producing people for that group, but they don't see outside. So this layer that is outside is the one that needs to be both leading and both being a part of outside. So it continuously is going from inside out and continuously bringing information from outside to the inside. I hope this made sense, and I hope you enjoy the next chapter.